in this one, guys, we're going to talk about the Nia Church. The Nia Church would have been in existence back behind me here, but it, of course, doesn't exist in this time. It would have been in the Byzantine time. I'm going to explain a little bit of history here, but it's very, very significant for us to understand this building. Okay, this building is a real building. We're going to go through the history and its significance and great importance in determining the location of the true temple. So stay tuned. We're going to go and go through the museums here and show you the church.
Now, as we look at the Nia Church, it's important that we realize, as this shows us here, that Jerusalem is completely destroyed. Jerusalem is kind of like just layers, like time, okay? If you had a timetable going down to up in time, that's Jerusalem. It's destroyed, and then it's rebuilt, and destroyed, and rebuilt, destroyed, and rebuilt. And the history is very important for us to learn from, so we don't repeat the same mistakes. But this is basically showing Jerusalem completely destroyed at 70 AD. Okay. Now, in this little display here, we have early Christians coming to Jerusalem after it's destroyed. And this is an ancient map called the Madaba map, which you can see here. What we'll do is, this one isn't, you can't see it that well here. I'll show you another one. We can really look at the details of the map. These are the cardos, the Western cardo, the Eastern cardo, and it does show the Nia Church. Let's see. I can kind of see it. I'm just going to try and point it out. It's right there. Okay, so this is a Byzantine, what Byzantine means around 200 to 600 AD map. Okay, and this map does show kind of a Christian Jerusalem, and we have churches coming. The Jews are kicked out. The Christians come in and start building lots of churches. So that's what we have in this display, is the Nia Church. And here we can see an artist's rendition of what the particular church may have looked like. It was very large, as we'll show you in the various maps. But Justinian, went to build, this part of the Eastern Roman Empire, started rebuilding Jerusalem. So Justinian authorized the building of this church, it's called the Nia, which means new church. So Justinian, renowned for his ambitious construction programs throughout the empire, one of his major projects was the new church of St. Mary in Jerusalem, known as the Nia Church. So that's what we can see here. We can also see that there are clearly indications of when it in Greek was authorized by Justinian. That's what we have here. And a mosaic. On the floor, we have a copy of the mosaic that was in the church. That's what the mosaic had looked like. So this is, a known site, a known church at this time period. And we'll look at the history of it as well. Now, because they have a little bit more information here on the Nia Church, we have, kind of a rendition, artist rendition here. But we have Justinian was renowned for his ambitious construction programs throughout the empire. One of his projects was the new church of St. Mary in Jerusalem, known as Nia Church. Okay, and here are inscriptions. Okay, dedicated inscription to the Emperor Justinian, found in excavation of the Nia Church complex in today's Jewish quarter. This is the work of our most pious Empress Flavius Justinius, carried out with magnificence under the care and devotion of the most holy Constantinus, priest hegemon of the 13th indiction. There is a mosaic here as well, mosaic floor from the Holy Ascension Monastery on the Mount of Olives, apparently from the 5th century. So this is this Nia Church, and this is what we've been showing you that was probably built in the place of the temple. Here's a 3D rendition of the Nia Church that I thought I'd share. And basically what we're looking at here is a model, and a very large church, of course. What we consider is that this portion here had the Western Cardo Road. And again, the reason this is important is that the temple vessels were housed here. And Justinian may have actually built this church to house those temple vessels. If he did, he also built it in where he believed the actual location of the temple was. So isn't that interesting that the temple vessels went back to Jerusalem and an actual Christian leader placed them in the place where he believed the temple to be?
Okay guys, this is the Nia Church here. The Nia Church is around 200 to 600 AD. So this is the Byzantine Christian time period of Jerusalem. This map here is showing the Temple Mount. It's showing these cardos. You can see this cardo in the other video we've shown you this cardo. This one is running straight from Damascus Gate here along. We showed you the pillars and everything here, but at this point of this cardo, guys, this is perfectly north and south. Nearly all of Jerusalem has opposed lines, but this is perfect north and south. And this Nia Church has a foundation, which we're going to look at. It exists to this day. But what this is showing us is that we have one road, cardo, here. We have another road and cardo here. We'll also show you evidence of this. Now, with this place here along the western wall of the Temple Mount, there is a road that goes to Herod's palace. Okay, so what we're considering is that this area right in here, in this particular box, is what we're considering as the true location of the temple. Okay, but what we have to realize is that these roads existed at the time of the first temple. Of course, the Nia Church did not exist at the time of the first temple. This is a few hundred years, 130 years later, okay? But this is very, very significant. We're going to talk about some more of the history here, but this gives you a kind of artist's rendition of what it would have looked like in Jerusalem 200 to 600 BC. Now, this church was destroyed by the Persians. The Persians came in later and they destroyed all the churches. They only left one church, and that was in Bethlehem, because they saw Persian kings in that church. But now, let's take a look at some, I'm going to have links in the description field, but let's take a look at some history of this church, okay? And it's fascinating when we look at this. First and foremost, we're going to have a foundation. We're going to go out and look at this foundation. You can get the links here. But this church, we do have the foundation just outside the old city walls, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to go there. We're going to measure it to see its north, south, east, west coordinates and the authentic, foundation of this location. Here's some examples of the layout of what it might look like. And the foundation. Now, I want to read some of this. So bear with me. Let's see, the temple treasures. Now, what's interesting is that this goes into the history of the temple treasures. So in the Arch of Titus, built in Rome in 82 AD, it depicts the Romans' victory over the Jews. This is the famous arch that has the menorah, and they're taking the temple treasures from Jerusalem to Rome.
Arch of Titus, which you can see behind me. Obviously, we have in this a menorah. Now, what the Arch of Titus is, it's a processional monument in Rome that was made around 82 AD of Rome's conquest of Jerusalem. So what we have here is we have some temple treasures clearly mentioned We have a menorah here. This is just a replica. The original shows a table of showbread and the trumpets. And we're going to show you the significance of the Nia Church as it relates to the temple treasures and the history of what happened to the temple treasures after Rome.
So the temple treasures end up in this church. And isn't that interesting? So that's where this church is so significant, that eventually the temple treasures were in Rome. From Rome, they went to Turkey. From Turkey, they came back to Jerusalem. And again, we have this description. The temple treasures were kept in Rome until Rome fell to the Vandals. The Vandals were defeated by the Byzantine Empire, which recovered the temple treasures and took them to Constantinople. During the triumphal procession through Constantinople with the captives and goods that were taken, the Vandals, the Jewish temple treasures were seen among the booty. Okay, so this is in Josephus, the War of the Jews. And among these treasures of the Jews, which Titus had taken, brought to Rome after the capture of Jerusalem, one of the Jews, seeing these things, approached those in the emperor and said, "These treasures I think expedient to carry to a place in Byzantium," or Byzantine Empire. Indeed, and these were with Solomon. Okay, they're saying some of these were with Solomon. For it is because of these captured the palace of the Romans that now the Roman army was captured by the Vandals. So they're saying that the Romans were defeated by the Vandals because of the treasures that were in the temple. And so then what happens is they then are taken away 49 years after the death of Justinian, 70 years after the dedication of the Nia Church. Again, 70 years. The Persians captured Jerusalem with the help of the Jewish allies, and the Nia Church was plundered in 614 by the Jews and Persians. Now the temple treasures are lost. We don't know where they are. But that's the last time we hear about they are actually in this church. So isn't that interesting? The treasures went to Rome. From Rome, they went to Turkey. From Turkey, they came back to Jerusalem to a Christian church. And then after that, the Persians take over, and then they take them. So who knows? Maybe in these times, those treasures resurface and come back to Jerusalem once again.
And our map is already revealing fascinating new clues. The Nea's lowest level is particularly intriguing.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Oh, now that's interesting. It's far more uneven than it appeared in person, and it looks slanted, which could mean there are secrets buried beneath it.
Now as we look at the Nia Church, you can see that it's running parallel to the Cardo. This is called the Western Cardo. This is the Eastern Cardo. It's perfectly north to south in this portion. The part that we can see outside the wall is this part. They're kind of somewhat representing the modern walls here, and this corner of it, or a certain corner of the Nia Church, is exposed on the outside of the wall. Okay, but this orientation north to south, again, is very critical for us. We also find that shared here as we measure. This old city map, again, does have the two Cardos, very important, and this is the area here we're considering. Now, why are we spending so much time talking about our north to south, east to west? Well, everywhere the Ark of the Covenant went, the children of Israel always positioned the Ark of the Covenant perfectly north, south, east, and west. We have evidence of this in Shiloh. We have a whole video on Shiloh, and the Ark of the Covenant rested in Shiloh for over 300 years, okay? The foundation remains of that location where the tabernacle, and then they actually built a temporary temple, okay? So we know it was positioned perfectly, okay? We also know that Kiryat Yamin, another place the Ark of the Covenant rested for 20 years, was also positioned perfectly north to south, east to west. Now, the Temple Mount is not positioned north, south, east, west, which we can clearly see. So we know it is not the proper place of the temple, because it has to be positioned perfectly north, south, east, west, and it must have a west to east orientation. Moses' tabernacle was east to west was 100 cubits, okay? North it was 50 cubits. So the Temple Mount is opposite. Its orientation is more north to south than east to west. So it's obviously not the pattern of the temple, and it's not positioned properly north, south, east, and west. Okay, this is the corner of the Nia Church. We are on the wall. Amazing view overlooking down below the city of David here, Mount of Olives. And right here is our cornerstone of the Nia Church. Now, what we're pointing out is this is the southern and eastern corner of the temple complex. Okay, over here we have a Cardo, which is a little bit obscured, but it's over there. And then this is the outside of the perimeter of the temple complex. And you can see that corner is what we're looking at here as this corner of this Nia Church. See that line running there? Okay. There's lots of other things, but this is the main foundation of this church. And again, we have a perfect north-south orientation with this Cardo here. This one is not perfectly north to south. We've measured that. However, this corner of what we're considering as a complex, this whole thing is not just one building, but a temple complex, okay? And this corner is what we're seeing. All right, and here is our north reading. You can see as it's aligned with the wall, it is showing perfect north reading. See that? 0 to 360 degrees, perfect north. And again, very, very important, very significant, because the temple would have been aligned in such a manner. And as we position to the west, point to the west, again, we have a perfect reading, 270 degrees to the west. Josephus in the War of the Jews, Book 7, Chapter 5. After these triumphs were over and after the affairs of the Romans were settled in the foundations, Vespasian resolved to build a temple of peace, which was finished in a short time, so that glorious manner was beyond all human expectation and opinion, for he now had the providence to build such a thing. Let's keep going here. Okay. And when they had desire to see one of them after another, he also laid up therein those gold vessels and instruments that were taken out of the Jewish temple, as ensigns of his glory. But he gave order that he should lay up their law in the purple vessels of the holy place in the royal palace itself. The temple treasures, now this is the article, were kept in Rome until Rome fell to the Vandals. The Vandals, in turn, defeated by the Byzantine Empire, which is the eastern part of the Roman Empire, which recovered the temple vessels and took them to Constantinople. During the triumphal procession through Constantinople with the captives and the goods taken from the Vandals, the Jewish temple treasures were seen among the booty. So the Jewish temple treasures were seen in Constantinople, and they were recorded. Okay, among these were the treasures of the Jews, which Titus, together with certain others, had brought to Rome after the capture of Jerusalem. One of the Jews, seeing these things, approached one of the known to the emperor and said, "These treasures I think it inexpedient to carry into the palace in Byzantium. Indeed, it is not possible for them to elsewhere than the place where Solomon, the king of the Jews, formerly placed them. So they bring them back to the Byzantine Empire in Jerusalem. For it is because of these that Geysers captured the palace of the Romans, and now the Romans' army has captured the Vandals. So he's talking about curses that have happened as a result of these temple treasures. And when this have been brought to the ears of the emperor Justinian, he became afraid and quickly sent everything to the sanctuaries of the Christians in Jerusalem. So they go from Constantinople into Jerusalem. 49 years after the death of Justinian and 70 years after the dedication of the Nia Church, the Persians captured Jerusalem with help from their Jewish allies. So now the Nia Church is considered the place of the temple treasures, and then the Jews and Persians take over the Christian churches and destroy them. The Nia Church was plundered in 614 by the Jews and Persians. History records that all churches in Jerusalem at the time, with the exception of the Holy Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, because they saw on the walls Persian kings, so the Persians didn't destroy, that was the wise men they saw in Bethlehem, right? You remember the story. Well, the Persians saw the wise men on the wall and said, oh, these guys are Persians, so they didn't kill the church in Bethlehem. Okay, but all the other churches were burnt by the Persian invaders and their Jewish allies. And the fact that these churches were plundered is confirmed by the fact that the Persians captured the Christians thought to be the true cross from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Temple treasures taken from Rome by Titus in 70 AD, returned to Jerusalem by Justinian in 534, were possibly taken back by the Jews in 614 from the Nia Church. So from that point, then we don't know what happened. Okay, this concludes it. The Nia Church. What have we learned? In the Nia Church, we've learned that this church built at a time period of Christian Jerusalem. And we consider it's possible that the temple treasures did exist here. It's important for us to understand because it does give us an indication of where the temple is, okay? So just beyond here, we have Dung Gate. We have newer walls. All of this would have been inside of the older walls at the time of the Byzantine Empire, okay? So it gives you an idea of how low this church was in relation to Jerusalem that's built up. We'll take a look over here. You can see how high it is and how built up it is. But that concludes it, guys. This is a series of compelling information on the true location of the temple. So we do have a playlist. The Nia Church is part of that playlist. And, I can't encourage you enough to watch the other parts, because where we're standing is the area that was indicated in the Qumran maps, okay? It is this area that we're looking at. The temple is a large complex, so it's not just one little building. It's lots of buildings, lots of facilities, a large area, okay? So this is the east and the south of the border of that complex. So thanks for watching, and God bless you. Now here you can see how much higher the Jewish quarter present day is built, but this would be much lower, and this is the foundation here, our cornerstone.